The day I walked out of prison, 2 men were waiting for me. One had sent me there, the other had sealed my fate with a gavel's echo. A blizzard raged that February afternoon in 2025, piling snow so thick outside the gates that they looked like 2 snowmen standing guard. I ignored them both. "Clara, find a job when you're out. Live a good life," the guard said as he unlocked the door, his voice gruff, but not unkind. I nodded absently, peering through the iron bars of the window. Beyond the swirling flakes, I spotted a row of black cars parked at the entrance, Silas's sleek Mercedes and Leonard's polished Porsche Panamera. In the storm, 2 figures stood motionless by their vehicles. Silas held a black umbrella, his gaze fixed on the gate, while Leonard kept glancing at his watch, impatient as ever. My ex-boyfriend and my childhood friend. How touching they looked, waiting for me in the snow, if only they hadn't been the ones to lock me away, with a side order to take good care of me inside. I might have cried from the sentiment. 5 years ago, it all unraveled. I'd gone to confront Serena, Silas's spoiled little sister, after a tragedy that broke me. Our argument turned violent, and in the chaos of self-defense, I hurt her. When Silas found us, I was still clutching a blood-streaked knife, forcing a weak smile through my panic. Serena, crumpled on the floor, whimpered, "Brother." Silas didn't hesitate, he charged at me, pinned me to the ground with a single twist of his arm. I was pregnant with his child then, too weak to fight back. Leonard arrived moments later, his eyes blazing red with fury. "How could you be so cruel, Clara?" he demanded. I didn't get a chance to explain before the cuffs snapped around my wrists. In court, Leonard, the brilliant law student turned prosecutor, represented Serena's side. His words cut like blades, painting me as a reckless monster. "Clara, this is the justice you deserve," he declared as the judge sentenced me to 5 years for excessive self-defense. I lost everything that day, my freedom, my unborn child, and the only family I had left. Prison was hell. The first months were a blur of beatings and blind spots, no cameras, no witnesses. They'd yank my hair, shove my face into filthy buckets, kick my lower back until bruises bloomed like dark flowers. I was stubborn at first, refusing to cry, but pain teaches you quick. I learned to survive. I cozied up to a tough inmate, washing her feet with a grin even as the water splashed my face, scrubbing her clothes until my hands cracked. One night, she took pity on me. "Poor kid," she whispered. "Someone paid to have you roughed up." I didn't need to ask who. Silas. I'd hurt his precious sister, and he wanted me broken. I remembered how he'd chased me once, back when we were in love. 20 drones lit up the night sky, spelling out my name. "Clara, let me protect you forever," he'd said. Now, that promise tasted like ash. I begged the guard to let me slip out the back. I couldn't face them, Silas with his cold vengeance, Leonard with his sanctimonious guilt. What if they still weren't done with me? I was powerless against their wealth, their influence. My life was cheap, but I could still run. The root of it all was my grandfather, the only person who'd ever loved me unconditionally. My father died in a motorcycle crash when I was 5, my mother vanished soon after. Grandpa raised me alone, piecing together a living by folding paper boxes, crushing plastic bottles, scavenging scraps. We lived in a shack beneath an overpass when I hit middle school, not because the city had more trash to collect, as he claimed, but because he wanted me to attend a better school. City kids had shiny hair clips. I pestered him for one, too naive to understand our poverty. He'd lingered outside a boutique for hours, pacing, before buying me a cheap little clip, the brightest thing I owned. When my teacher, Mrs. Hawthorne, helped me apply for a scholarship, she asked her son Leonard to look out for me. Leonard was the school's golden boy, top of every class. He'd tutor me sometimes, and I soaked it up, my grades climbing fast. Grandpa was so grateful he'd sweep Mrs. Hawthorne's yard. refusing payment. "Your girl's a beauty, Clara," she'd tease. "Maybe she'll marry my Leonard one day." Grandpa would blush and stammer, "Oh, no, no, that's too much." When I got into college, Grandpa returned to our village alone. I followed in secret, watching him kneel at every doorstep, begging for loans to fund my dreams. He was my rock, my reason to fight. I swore I'd make it big and give him the life he deserved. Then he was gone. It started my freshman year. I met Silas, a charming senior with a flashy car and a warm smile. I brought him to meet Grandpa, who patted his arm and said, "He's a good lad, Clara. Treat him well." Grandpa worried I looked too shabby next to Silas, so he kept scavenging, despite my protests. "You're a grown girl now," he'd say. "You need pretty dresses." I hated that he risked himself for me. That winter, 5 years ago, it happened. Grandpa was hauling a sack of scraps through the park when an unleashed dog barreled into him, a pedigreed beast worth 70 grand, Serena bragged later. He hit the ground hard, neck broken, spine shattered. The hospital bills piled up fast. I went to Serena, begging for help. She smirked down at me. "Oh, you're my brother's little girlfriend, huh? Didn't get enough cash from him, so you're scrounging from me? My dog's leg is fractured because of that old man. I should be charging you. Your family's nothing but trash. He deserved to die." I snapped. Pregnant and frail, I lunged at her. She grabbed a knife, slashing at my face. In the struggle, I wrested it free and stabbed her, not to kill, just to stop her. The police hauled me away as I screamed for Silas and Leonard to save Grandpa. They didn't listen. They hovered over Serena, soothing her tears, while I was dragged off in chains. Grandpa lingered in the ICU for 15 days. Discharged with no one to care for him, he went home and drank pesticide. He was gone. That same night, crumpled on a cell floor, I miscarried. I couldn't save him or my baby. Serena visited me once in prison, leaning close to hiss, "My dog's well trained. Guess why it hit your grandfather?" Her words clawed at me. She'd hated me, maybe for stealing Silas's attention, maybe for my bond with Leonard. I'd brought this on Grandpa. If I'd never loved Silas, he'd still be alive. I wasn't his good girl. I was filth. Out in the snow, free at last, I felt adrift. The sky stretched wide, buildings loomed tall, and I wandered with no direction. Grandpa was dead, I had no home. I'd find a job with room and board, I told myself, one step at a time. Exhausted, I slumped on some steps, watching people bustle by. A toddler waddled past, and I stared too long. Prison had no children. If mine had lived, they'd be clinging to me now, calling me Mama. The kid's mother noticed, bristling. "What are you looking at?" she snapped. I mumbled an apology and shuffled off. Her husband tried to calm her, sparking a spat. "Oh. You're defending her 'cause she's pretty," she yelled, then swung at me. I blocked the slap, but didn't fight back. She lunged again, and a figure stepped between us. Leonard. He caught her wrist, voice cool as steel. "Ma'am, assault's a detainable offense." She froze. I turned to bolt. But Leonard grabbed me, his grip firm. "Why didn't you come find me, Clara?" he asked, eyes clear and earnest. "Why would I? I hurt your precious Serena." "I figured you'd want revenge," I shot back, bitter. "Clara, the law is the law. You hurt someone, you paid the price. But you've served your time. We can be friends again, I'll look out for you," he said, all noble sincerity. I glared up at him. "I don't need you, Leonard. Go protect your goddess Serena. If I see her, I might not hold back. You didn't fight that woman just now. You don't want to go back inside, do you?" He wouldn't let go. I wasn't surprised he'd found me. Leonard was clever, relentless. 5 years had sharpened him, gone was the brash boy, replaced by a man tempered by time. I shook him off and walked away. He followed, silent as a shadow. We'd been close once. In school, I'd repaid his mother's kindness by doing his chores, carrying his bag. After class, he'd study while I swept, then trail me home, aloof but constant. I'd tease him, Lord Leonard. And he'd chase me, never catching up. In college, I hauled his dorm boxes, made his bed, fetched his meals, until Silas came along. Leonard drifted away, growing tight with Serena. I joked once, got a girlfriend yet? He'd snapped. I'm not some gold digger chasing rich boys like you. The words stung, and we never patched it up. He thought I'd sold out for Silas's money. Silas and I were real, though. 3 years of love, raw, mutual, deep. I never took his cash, I'd work extra shifts to match his gifts, split every bill. He learned to skip fancy dates, choosing diners instead. But Leonard and Silas clashed. 1 night in study hall, a blackout hit. In the dark, Silas kissed my ear. When the lights flickered on, he punched Leonard square in the face. They brawled, I broke it up, both bleeding. After that, Leonard vanished from my life, until the trial. That day Silas pinned me down, guarding Serena as I bled out my child. I saw him shield her the way he'd once shielded me. My love died there. Leonard tailed me as I trudged from shop to shop, begging for work. My record was a stain no one would touch. My forced smiles faded, night fell, moon climbing the streetlights. I sank onto a curb, hands tucked in my sleeves. Leonard sat beside me, quiet at first, then spoke. Clara, I know you hate me. You hate that I put you away. But I had no choice, the Shaws had me cornered. You broke the law. I tried visiting you, but you refused me. Now you're out, struggling. I want to make it right. His voice was soft, cautious. I said nothing. He pressed on. I've got my own firm now, a branch out of state. No Shaw influence. You could clerk there, I'd keep you safe. Silas is still looking for you, his tone darkened. Safe? Or owned? I sneered. I'd protect you, Clara. No more pain. He shed his coat, draping it over me. Come home with me. I wanted to slug him, prison taught me where to hit hardest, but I stopped. Silas was hunting me, Leonard offered escape. His coat repulsed me, but I clutched it tight, faking a smile. Okay. I'll go. Relief washed over him, tinged with pity. For the first time, he walked ahead. His place was prepped, new clothes, a room just for me. He'd planned this. While showing me around, his phone rang. He stepped out, back turned, but prison had honed my ears. I caught her name, Serena. He was brisk. Next month, I'll go with you for the ring. No joy in his voice, just tension. Keep your brother in line. He's still at the West Side Villa, recovering? I'll send a shrink's number. He hung up, returning with that practiced smile. Serena and Leonard, engaged. Silas, unhinged. I filed it away, feigning calm. Then his hands gripped my shoulders, his grin too perfect, Silas's grin. I was weak before, he said, pulling me close. Now I'll take back what's mine. He was mimicking Silas, bold, possessive. The shy Leonard I'd known was gone, replaced by something sharper, hungrier. I'd underestimated him. 5 years had forged a predator. Silas is digging into my firm, he said, hugging me tight, chin on my head. Come abroad with me. I'll explain everything there, make up for what you've lost, not yet, though. I hugged back, voice soft. Thank you, Leonard. If only it had been you from the start. Really? He asked, cupping my face. Yeah. If I'd never met Silas, I said, too earnest to doubt. Leonard moved fast, shifting assets, planning our exit. His home was a cage, black decor like Silas loved, not the blue Leonard once favored, black. Coffee instead of sweets. He was becoming Silas. Curtains stayed drawn, he held my hand at night, waking if I pulled away, eyes glinting like a snake's. I remembered a school contest, daily tasks for a gold butterfly prize. I'd quit, but Leonard stuck it out, 11,680 questions answered. Slipping it into my bag. Grandpa made me return it, scolding me for accepting gifts. Leonard's patience was obsession. He'd never let me go. So I played along. I reminisced about our childhood, stoking nostalgia. I nudged him back to himself, praising blue, craving sweets, urging authenticity. My strategy? Sincerity. Each morning, I faced the mirror, chanting, "I love Leonard," 30 times. His lawyers I missed nothing, every falter risked exposure. I convinced myself first to convince him. He softened, trusting my act. One night, he whispered, "I'll make you love me again." I smiled, hiding the truth. I'd use him to reclaim my life, then destroy them all. On Valentine's Day, Leonard told me he had to work late, no lunch at home today. Normally, he'd rush back every noon to keep me company, so the excuse rang hollow. His face was earnest, tinged with remorse, but I'd overheard his call. He wasn't at the office, he was off to pick out wedding rings with Serena. If I hadn't known, I'd have bought the act. I pouted, letting a flicker of hurt show. It delighted him. He pinched my cheek, voice soft. "Clara, wait for me." Then he left. I slipped on a coat, grabbed my tools, and followed. He'd locked the door, but locks were no match for me, prison had taught me that trick. I trailed him to a gleaming luxury plaza. Serena stepped out of her sports car, all confidence, and looped her arm through his like it was second nature. Through the spotless glass storefront, I watched her flit between counters, trying on rings. Leonard sat by the window on a leather couch, his face a mask of indifference, idly brushing his arm as if flicking off dust. But when Serena glanced his way, he flashed a doting smile, practiced, perfect. I edged closer, pressing against the glass. His eyes locked onto mine, widening with a storm of shock, panic, and something like joy. He darted a look at Serena, she'd moved to a counter out of sight, a blind spot. My fingers traced a heart on the cold pane. His hand rose instinctively, pressing against the glass where mine rested. It was our old game from middle school. Winter days, I'd doodle on foggy windows, words, shapes, while he'd grumble about my childishness, only to join in. Now, our palms aligned through the barrier, I sketched a crying face. He scrawled 2 words, "Go home." I shook my head. He glanced at Serena again, jaw tightening, then strode out, long legs cutting through the plaza's crowd. On the bustling street, he yanked me into a fierce hug, heedless of stares. His breath warmed my neck, low and rough. "Home. I'll come right back." As he held me, I caught Serena emerging from the shop behind him. I pulled away, slapped on a mask and cap, and vanished into the throng. Half an hour later, he burst through our door, winded and flustered. This wasn't part of his plan, an accident, sure, but one that lodged deep in his chest. That night, he slid a ring onto my finger, a butterfly carved into the band, its wings cradling a dazzling diamond. He pressed his ear to my chest, listening to my heartbeat. "I used to hate you," he murmured, eyes shut, lashes fanning like fragile wings. "Hated that you didn't choose me. Turns out it wasn't resentment, it was love." He called me a little devil, said I'd cornered him. He sped up his plans to whisk me abroad. I knew Serena had seen me. She wouldn't let it slide, not after I'd stolen her brother's affection and now dared to snare her fiancé. In her mind, I was shameless, a vulture circling her perfect life. Serena moved fast. She hired thugs to snatch me and ship me overseas, ironic, since I'd half expected it. The twist? Her muscle was Julia, my prison ally. Julia had shielded me inside after I'd won her over, washing her feet, scrubbing her clothes, grinning through it all. The day before my release, she'd pinned my shoulders, lips red as roses, twirling my hair. "Clara, get out early. Wait for me, kid." Her crew nabbed me, dragging me to a seaside bluff. Serena strutted up, pinching my face. "Clara, you're the most brazen bitch I've ever met. You think Leonard loves you? You're a toy, a teenage fling he can't ditch. Since you love being played, I'll send you abroad for a real good time, foreigners and all." She flashed a saccharine smile, dimples and all. I didn't flinch. "Serena," I said, grinning back, "Leonard's never even touched you, has he?" That struck a nerve. Her face twisted, she yanked out a knife to carve up my cheeks. Julia's goon snatched it away. Serena huffed, settling for clawing my face and spitting venom instead. I counted the seconds. Leonard was close. When he arrived, spotting me held at knife point, he charged like a beast, blue jacket flapping, my influence pulling him back to his old color. I leapt into the sea right before his eyes. Julia's crew had already loosened my ropes, the blade at my throat was a prop. The icy water swallowed me whole. I dove, swam a few strokes, and tucked behind a reef. Julia's team would scatter, leaving Serena and Leonard to face off. This was my gambit, a cicada shedding its shell, to spark their war. I couldn't wait for Leonard's devotion to waver, his obsession was ripe now, but fragile. I'd built him up, let him taste me, only to rip it away. 5 years ago, the Shaws pressured him, and he turned on me, nursing his grudge. See what choosing Silas cost you. He'd tried visiting me in prison, denied every time, and that gnawed at him. His hate faded, he dreamed of us. Instead, bank accounts in my name abroad, a future. Now, as he grasped it, I torched it. What's worse than never having, Leonard? Having and losing. Who do you hate most now? Serena, right? I swam to the far shore, hitched a ride, and fled. Later, I learned I'd missed the show, Leonard, ever poised, slamming Serena's head into the dirt. Until she begged, him scouring the coast for me till dawn, waves drowning his hoarse screams of my name. My next stop, the West Side Woodland Villa. I knew that villa well, Silas's love nest from our dating days. The Shaws owned a mountain, sculpting it into a quirky retreat. Silas was there, recovering. The door's facial recognition still had my data, unchanged after all this time. It clicked open easily. Swiss Army knife in hand, I slipped inside and saw him, Silas, reclining on a sofa, head tilted back, jawline sharp against the dim light. I crept close, raising the blade. His eyes snapped open, and in a flash, he seized my wrist. Recognition hit, shock, then wild joy. His lips trembled. "Clara. I've been searching for you." Up close, he was a wreck, dark circles hollowing his eyes, frame gaunt, once brash vigor dulled to a haunted edge. I stayed silent. He spotted the knife, pulled me into his chest, his heat, his cedar scent engulfing me. Guiding my hand, he pressed the blade to his heart. "Clara, don't ignore me. I'll die right now." He pushed harder. The knife clattered free. My lips quivered, I forced a glare. "It's not that I can't, I just," tears spilled before I finished, calculated yet real. His face lit up, joy uncontained. He patted my back. "Clara, I get it, I get it." He clung to me, terrified to let go. "Clara, I messed up," he rasped, shaking. "I didn't ask you anything, just let them lock you away. I've spent years pulling strings. Spending millions to get you out, but it never worked." Guilt and grief poured from him, tangible as the tremors racking his body. I said nothing, shrugging off my shirt. Pointing to my waist, scarred from prison beatings, I gave a bleak smile. Silas, your strings got me this, huh? My finger slid to my stomach. And here, remember? A baby was growing. You promised marriage after graduation, a healthy kid, boy like you, girl like me. My laugh turned bitter. It's blood now, husband. That shattered him. He swayed, eyes vacant, staring through me. Feel my pain, Silas. Match my agony with your regret. Fury surged, nearly toppling me, but his hand steadied me, red-rimmed eyes, lips bitten raw. His wrists bore ugly, mottled scars. Self-harm. No wonder he needed a shrink. I never planned to stab him. My goal was misery, raw, gnawing remorse. With Silas, I didn't need masks, he'd always felt my pain like it was his. That night, I stayed. He didn't touch me, didn't dare share the bed, just curled up on the floor like a loyal hound. In his sleep, he wept, a low, broken sound, mumbling, Clara, don't go. The bold air was gone, replaced by this brittle shell. Once, he'd clung to me in bed, pouting when I squirmed away in summer heat. Now, he tiptoed around me, a shadow of himself. I pressed him, voice sharp. Silas, 5 years ago, you picked Serena. Dumping me again? He flinched, softening his tone. Clara, never. I'll give you anything. He begged forgiveness, clutching my hand like a lifeline. My grandpa raised me, I said, tears welling. He scrimped his whole life, made you ribs once, a luxury he skipped even at New Year's. That saint of a man, Serena's dog. Killed him. I gripped his shirt, sobbing into his chest. Silas, I want her to pay. Can she bring him back? They say a life for a life. I want her dead, can you do that? He froze, stroking my hair. Silence stretched, broken only by our breaths, his heartbeat, my sniffles. Then, faintly, yes. I looked up. His face was ghostly, a condemned man's. Yes, he repeated, over and over, voice cracking, eyes feverish. 2 lives, he added, Grandpa and our child. His grip on my wrist tightened, unyielding. Silas and Serena's bond had soured after my arrest. He blamed her, she feared him, scheming to oust him from the Shaw board. I'd poured over 5 years of tabloids post-release, headlines. Screaming of sibling rivalry, Serena gobbling up shares, stock plunging as Silas's breakdowns went public. The Shaws were a fading dynasty, Leonard's promise to crush them wasn't empty. Silas's recovery was a lie. He skipped real meds for hallucinogens, chasing visions of me, us cuddling, me rocking a baby that looked like him, whispering, I love you, husband. When he saw me for real, he latched on, terrified I'd vanish. I played cold, cursing him, shoving him off. You promised revenge, scared now? He'd bow his head, trembling. I just want to see you more. I softened, dangling hope. Help me, Silas, and we'll be like before. A blatant lie, but he beamed, clinging to it. Sleep eluded him, he'd watch me in the dark, eyes glowing. Clara, let me take your picture. I glared into the lens, pure hate. He treasured it, pressing it to his chest. Then he left, pocketing a Nepalese kukri from the drawer. I called Leonard, I'm alive. West Side Villa. Save me. He raced over, eyes bloodshot. Before he spoke, I kissed him. Leonard, I want you. We'd been together. Before, post-release, he couldn't resist me. Here, I whispered. He gripped me, wild. Silas touched you, didn't he? I lied, tears falling. Yes, forced a child, a home. Leonard snapped, biting my shoulder, staking his claim. 10 minutes later, Silas returned. The door slammed open, light framing him, blood-soaked, shirt and face painted crimson, kukri dripping. He'd done it, avenged me. I'd texted him, hurry back. He'd rushed to see me one last time, knowing his fate. What he saw was me in Leonard's arms, flashing a sultry smile. He broke. Hands shook, teeth chattered, tears streamed, washing blood from his jaw. He lunged, a rabid beast. 3 choices collided. I shoved Leonard forward, he shielded me, Silas swerved the blade. From me. They clashed, Silas weakened but feral, Leonard calculated, unwilling to die or kill legally. Clara, if I win, will you marry me? Leonard roared. I lounged on the sofa, smirking. Win first. Leonard's eyes darkened. He wrested the kukri, aimed for Silas's heart. I kicked it away. Enough. You won. He sneered. No, Clara, you can't let him die. I lost. Then he stabbed Silas anyway. Police found Silas unconscious, Serena dead at the Shaw estate, his doing. His mental state spared him prison, he was detained instead, clutching my photo. Leonard's extra strike was excessive defense, 5 years. In court, cuffed, he found me in the crowd, offering a fragile smile, mouthing, "Don't wait." Once, in school, he'd mouthed "wait" across a packed cafeteria, finding me every time. Now, I turned and left. Sun blazed as I visited Silas. He huddled, skeletal, humming our anniversary song, my guitar gift under villa stars. Back then, he'd leapt into the pool with me, laughing, "Clara, I'm crazy for you." Now, a nurse said, he screams for Clara when he snaps. This song calms him. I nodded. Outside, sunlight stung. A pink Lamborghini idled across the street. I grinned. Julia. She flicked off her sunglasses, red lips curving. Here I am, Clara.